Negotiations are a part of every real estate deal, but they don't have to be complicated or contentious. As a realtor, the best benefit that I can provide to my clients in handling negotiations is to help them feel the least amount of stress about this as possible. But it's always stressful because buying and selling real estate can be a stressful experience. This video is intended to better inform and set your expectations about the negotiations that you as the buyer or seller might have to undergo in just about any real estate deal. What's up? My name is Joshua Smith. I'm with the Home Agent Group. I want to talk to you about what you're up to and how we can expand together.
I'm gonna be honest with you, and you can cut this in.
What's the highlight of our entire trip?
Price is probably the most obvious point of negotiation. It's the first thing that someone looks at, and it's the first thing that we talk about when curating an offer. This is most commonly questioned when a listing appears to be overpriced. But in today's market, with fewer buyers out there, pretty much every listing is going to receive an offer under the list price. So the obvious goal is to make an offer based on what you feel the correct price is based on accurate market value. And the best way to find accurate value is to run comps. These are comparable properties to the one that is in question. And you can generate a value based on the benefits and drawbacks of the subject property according to those comps. You have to think a little bit like an appraiser or an underwriter for a bank. As a real estate professional, your agent should be able to provide this for you, whether a buyer or seller. And I find that if you can represent the facts of the market through sales data, there's little argument to be made by the other party. That being said, this doesn't always work. So moving past the obvious, let's look more at how the math can change to affect your bottom line. Negotiating for repairs, occupancy, even agency cost is on the table at times. These things don't all have to be discussed up front, but I try to set the tone when I get a feel for the negotiation tactics of the other parties involved in my own transactions. So say you're under contract and you've decided to proceed at a price that may be a little bit more than you want to spend as the buyer, and you kept inspections as a contingency to the purchase. Well, after you get under contract, you go into the inspections phase, begin your due diligence. This period of time is used for the buyers to have an inspector come through, evaluate the property, any number of licensed contractors, even mom and dad. Unless you agree to buy the property as is or explicitly without repairs, you can renegotiate the purchase price or have the seller credit some funds for repairs you find are needed that they didn't or didn't know about. You can ask for the seller to do those repairs before closing, and at times certain repairs will be required by the bank as a condition of closing. Now, other times a home warranty is an affordable alternative to repairs if it appears that it's just maintenance that's needed or appliances are getting old, but you need to be well informed about how much repairs cost so you can best inform your decision to move forward with a purchase and be able to defend a position if you're asking for a lot. Now, as a seller, when repairs come up, you likely will know that certain things need maintenance or repair, and in a seller disclosure state, you will have disclosed this up front. In a buyer beware state, you don't have to disclose, but either way, in theory, you will price the property according to those needs. But if not, know that a buyer can back out of a deal and get their earnest money back if they find anything that they don't like and the contingency for inspections is in place. The best way to avoid problems in a real estate transaction, both during and after the sale, is to be honest and disclose what you know. You can be held liable for problems after the fact if it's found that you didn't provide pertinent information during a sale. Another thing that often comes up, especially for sellers, is occupancy. Sometimes people need time after closing to organize affairs and move off the property. Depending on a buyer's circumstances, this might be an area where you as the buyer can offer the sellers a place to stay after the sale with what's called a temporary occupancy agreement. If you're buying with a loan, banks do not want you to create an agreement that lasts longer than 60 days. But generally speaking, in most of the instances where I've seen this as a need, people generally need a couple of days, weeks, maybe a month. But you can see where this is a value. There is a value and leverage in that time because it's reasonable to expect someone staying in what will be the buyer's property once they own it to have to pay for the time they need to stay there. Again, just another way to affect your bottom line. And there is value in just about every part of a real estate transaction because real property has value. In fact, it's surprising just how much value some contract terms can have. I've seen things as small as the ability to assign a contract, break a deal. It's very common for contracts to have assignability written into them, and this means that the buyer can change names or assign the contract to another party during the contract term. There are plenty of reasons for this, but one easy way to think about it is if you apply for a loan, for some reason you have to add a co-signer to that loan during the contract term, well, now you have to add a buyer to the transaction. Technically, that's an assignment of contract to add a party to the transaction. Another more common thing that I see is when an investor wants to make a purchase, they may put their own name as a buyer initially, or even an LLC that they currently own, and then they will assign it prior to closing to another, usually a new LLC name specifically for the property. But because this can be an issue for some, I try to let people know upfront if this is a possibility for a given buyer that I represent. Generally speaking, the best advice I can probably give about negotiations is something most people I find don't consider much. You have to remember that the buyers and sellers of real estate are people, even if a business is attached. So know that in day-to-day lives of people, things come up. We all know this. People get sick. Too soon to call back to COVID? In my business approach, I try to lay out the terms of a deal with all the parties in the beginning in an effort to create an environment that is open and honest and try to build a symbiotic relationship that will help deal with unforeseen circumstances. There are things that will happen that are out of anyone's control. You have to afford the same luxury to all parties in a transaction, even if it comes at a cost. Therein lies the reality that sometimes, even with an unavoidable circumstance, you may have to concede or ask for something that was not discussed up front if you want to close the deal. So the key takeaways are that negotiations don't have to be hard or emotional, but everything is negotiable. And we're all people just trying to live our lives. It's not rocket science, but it's good to know what to expect and that in any situation a deal can be made. You have more questions than answers, call me anytime. I hope that this was helpful for you.